We do see psychic epidemics in teenage girls first or worst. They're the people who become anorexic. They're the people who self-harm. They're the people who went through these hysterical laughing episodes and so on, if you look back historically speaking. I don't think anyone knows exactly why, but it's an observable fact at this point. But also...
I know why.
Oh, you know
why? I can tell you why.
Yeah, go on.
I know some of why. Well, look, when boys and girls are given personality tests before they hit puberty, there's not a lot of difference in average level of negative emotion experienced. But as soon as girls hit puberty, their proclivity to experience negative emotion, so that shame and guilt and disappointment and fear and depression, is elevated markedly in contrast to men. And it's permanently transformed at puberty, and it stays stable for the rest of women's lives. And so women reliably experience more negative emotion than men on average. Now, there's wide individual difference, and there's some men who experience more negative emotion than women, but we're talking about... And what that means, at least in part, is that the people, almost all the people who experience the highest levels of negative emotion, and that would include self-consciousness and shame, are female. And that kicks in at puberty. And
that's
so
really
then
interesting.
At puberty too, kids have to restructure their identities in quite a major way. And that's especially true for girls because they have, first of all, it happens to them earlier, right? So they're less mature when nature comes calling, let's say. Plus, as soon as puberty kicks in, they have these elevated levels of negative emotion. And one of the things we know, this is so interesting as far as I'm concerned, is that if terms that are reminiscent of self-consciousness load almost perfectly onto negative emotion. So there's almost no difference whatsoever between being self-conscious and experiencing guilt and shame and anxiety. And so if you add the stress of puberty and that physical transformation to the emotional transformation, and then you take the extreme outliers on the negative emotion continua, it's all women, it's all young women. And we know as well from the literature on gender dysphoria that the individuals who experience gender dysphoria, first of all, don't have suicidal ideation or those sorts of symptoms any more highly than people who experience non-gender dysphoria psychiatric disorders. So it's a class of general psychiatric disorder. And if they're associated with negative emotion, that's going to mostly affect young women.
That makes such sense. And they turn it onto their own bodies as well. Like the shame and the self-consciousness get turned onto their bodies, and in particular their breasts. Yeah. It's not by chance that they're cutting their breasts off. Yeah. And they jump onto whatever's offered to them. And I would say about the trans social contagion in particular, is it's sold as a 100% immediate solution. Like nobody tells an anorexic girl that we can just switch the anorexia off, but they do say to kids, if you're gender dysphoric, if you transition, magically you'll be better, and that all your problems will be solved because your problems stem from not understanding that you're actually really a boy.